Hey everybody, I'm Justin with VMPPerformance. Today we're going to be installing a VMP triple pass dual fan heat exchanger on this 1314 Shelby GT500. On a supercharged car, temperatures are incredibly important. As soon as you start to get into heat soak, the ECU has to pull timing to protect the motor and power starts to go way down. Our heat exchanger has 3 passes, a whole lot of frontal area, and dual fans to keep the intercooler temps as low as possible and prevent heat soak and prevent power loss. This installation is something you can do at home in your driveway. It takes about 3 to 4 hours. We use a plug-and-play wiring harness. Everything's pretty easy to install. This same heat exchanger also fits older GT500s and 5-liter Mustangs, so I'll mention a couple of the little differences that are unique to 1314 GT500s while we're doing the install. Step 1 is we're going to remove all the little push pins from the radiator cover, and we're going to get this guy out of the way. If you're doing this installation at home on the ground, you are probably just going to want to take the front wheels off. Since we've got a lift, we're not going to take the front wheels off, but we have to get to a couple of bolts here in the fenders and underneath to get the bumper off. Underneath the car, there's a myriad of ways to take this apart. We're actually going to take the bumper and the splitter and the tray down all together. So I'm going to use a 10mm here, and a 7mm here, and then this can all come down as one piece. Alright, so this is separated from the radiator support and from the fender liners. When I go to pull the bumper off, I'm going to have to watch the connectors for the fog lights, the turn signals, and the air temperature sensor, the ambient air temperature sensor. Other than that, it should all come right off. The heat exchanger is held in by 4 bolts, 2 here and 2 here, but there's also a nut on the back. So if you loosen the nut and hold it while using a cordless impact on the front, you can get this thing out a whole lot easier. On the bench here next to me, I've got the VMP dual fan triple pass heat exchanger and the factory 1314 GT500 heat exchanger. It's worth noting that this is the best heat exchanger Ford ever put in a GT500. In their quest to make it a 200-mile-per-hour car, they did not neglect this area. However, the VMP unit is triple pass. The water actually goes through three times to cool it down as much as possible, and it's got twin 11-inch SPAL fans on the back. So we're going to provide you with this harness. There's a separate relay for each SPAL fan, and it's worth noting that we use 11-inch SPAL brand fans on our heat exchanger. The 11s are actually a little bit quieter than some of the smaller fans like the 9s and the 10s. The fans are going to run whenever the intercooler pump is running, and that's basically going to cool things down when you're at low speeds, idling around town, in traffic, And when you're at the track, you can actually jumper the intercooler pump and the fans, or even install your own switch and cool the car down between rounds. The same goes for when you're on the dyno or waiting to go on the dyno. It just kills me sometimes that people will be at the track, idling in the staging lanes, hood down, listening to the radio with the air conditioning on, and just letting their cars get heat soaked to all get out. I do not have a picture of it here, so we're gonna have to pull one from the archives and flash it up on the screen for you. But the factory GT500 heat exchanger from 07 to 12 is only about this tall and not nearly as thick as a 13-14 unit. So those owners stand to gain the most from a heat exchanger upgrade, but 13-14 GT500s also stand to gain quite a bit because this has no fans to pull air through it when you're driving below, say, 80. And I don't know about you, but I can't drive 80 miles an hour all the time. Our heat exchanger gives you some ways to address that by both providing active cooling when the car is on, and then if you choose to jumper the heat exchanger pumps and fan or install a switch, you can actually cool it down while the car's turned off too. I'm going to prep the heat exchanger for installation by opening up the hardware kit. We've got a little parts list here, and most importantly, we got the blue snappies. I'm going to get them pre-installed on the heat exchanger mounting tabs on each side. There is a machined aluminum insert that goes inside the snappy to reinforce it, and you're going to want to go ahead and install those. When I do these, I always put the washer facing the front, and then there's going to be another washer that gets installed on the back. I'm going to go ahead and prep my bolts and get them pre-installed in the bumper so I've got something to hang the heat exchanger on when I install it. You're only going to want to go have them sticking out just a little bit, otherwise they'll get in your way. Right. One of the benefits of leaving these only partially installed is that once you get the heat exchanger on and you get a nut and a washer on the backside, you can hold the nut and screw this down at the same time, and then you only have a little bit more ratcheting to go on the backside. So the VMP, because of its triple pass design, has the inlet and the outlet in a slightly different place. The original heat exchanger had the connection down here, and the VMP is up here, so we're just going to reroute the factory hose to go up here. In the case of the inlet to the heat exchanger, it used to be on the back side over here, and now it's down here, so we're going to use a piece of hose that's included in the box and a little coupler to make the connection. If you have an 07 to 12 GT500 or a Coyote, the pump is actually going to be mounted over here in the fender with a bracket that we supply. In the case of the 13-14s, we don't touch the pump whatsoever because it's already mounted to the engine block, and there's already a heat exchanger here for the oil cooler in the case of the track pack cars. So this was the factory orientation of the line, and on the factory heat exchanger there was a connection right here. The VMP triple pass has the connection up there, so I'm going to reroute this up over this little support right here. And there's actually plenty of line to do this, and then I'm going to get it connected up top. Alright, so the VMP heat exchanger comes with a big piece of hose. Depending on the year that you're installing it on, you need varying amounts of the hose. For this 13-14, you're going to need about 10 inches right here. So I'm going to cut this hose to length, and then I'm going to install it here with a coupler. So this is the passenger side air deflector. These are unique to 13-14 GT500. The VMP heat exchanger is taller, so we've got to cut out a little bit around here. I'm just going to kind of go here, and I've got a pretty good idea of where it needs to be. So, finished product. So this is the passenger side air deflector. I'm going to cut this one a little bit differently because it's so much bigger. So we got the passenger side air deflector all trimmed up. We're going to go install both of these. Weird that they go in through the other side. We're ready to do our wiring harness. This harness is kind of a lot to handle sometimes, so the easiest thing to do is start by mounting the relays here to some studs under the bumper and also getting the ground mounted. Alright. We're going to take our 12 volt connection and feed it up under along with our ground connection. I want to get this ground on a good factory ground terminal because these studs over here have a lot of paint on them. You could probably use them, they'd probably work fine, but I'd rather have it on a real ground connection. We're going to make our 12 volt connection right here at the back of the fuse box. Our fuses are going to kind of live right over here in this area, so they're always easy to get to. Now that we've got power and ground connected up top, we've got two harnesses left down here below. These are going to connect to our fans, and this is going to run along the same path as our fan connections, and then it's going to run back into the engine bay and tie into the intercooler pump connector to get the 12 volt turn on signal for the fans. So this is our plug and play connection right here for the 13-14 GT500. This is the pump that's mounted to the block. There's actually a jumper harness installed on the factory pump, and that's where we're going to tap in. This goes in here. So this is how the 1314 GT500 is done. If you have an 07 to 12 GT500, the connection for the pump is going to be down in the fender with the pump, and VMP is going to use a certain harness specifically for 07 to 12 because the pump uses a different connector. So we are going to use a vacuum fill tool on the cooling system. This will pull a vacuum on the cooling system, which does two things. It checks it for leaks, and then when you take the vacuum off the cooling system, you stick a line in a bucket of coolant, and it quickly fills the whole system. It pretty much guarantees you won't have any air bubbles. It's important that we get the system filled up and test it before we put the bumper back on, because we have had plenty of times where the system does have air bubbles in it because we don't have an airlift vacuum bleed tool available to us, and customers are pulling the bumper back off, they're pulling lines off the inlet of the pump to try and get the air out, and it's just a big mess. So very, very important that you get your system filled and tested and you check for circulation before you put the bumper back on. On 2011 Up GT500s, the second relay from the back is the intercooler pump relay. I actually took a fuse and bent the terminals to mimic a relay, and I'm going to stick it in here and jumper the circuit so we can make sure the intercooler pump's working, we can test the fans, and verify that we've got a proper bleed on the system before we put everything back together. 1314 GT500s came with a bigger intercooler pump from the factory, and they actually have a bypass around the reservoir to prevent foaming. So it's really hard to tell the flow without actually kinking the bypass and then watching it. We've got a good fluid level in the tank. Our vacuum fill tool filled it perfectly. You're going to want to make sure you reach back here at some point and plug in your fog lights and your turn signals. So I don't know about you, but there's nothing more annoying to me than a fast blinking turn signal. Once this is lined up, it just clips back in pretty much the same way it came out. Everything's attached up here. We're going to go underneath and get everything screwed back together and then put the radiator cover back on top. So we got one that goes here. Another one right here. Goes to the underside and ties the fender liner into this tray. Like I said earlier, we just decided to take out these connections back here. There's a ton of them that you could take apart over here, but all you would do is break the splitter down into several pieces. We just needed the whole bumper, the splitter, and the tray to come off as one piece. Do not forget these bolts. Andrew's GT500 is buttoned up and back together. The VMP dual fan triple pass heat exchanger installation went great. It only took us about 3.5 hours, including shooting this installation video for VMP's website and Andrew's Mustang Lifestyle YouTube channel. If you want to learn more about upgrades for your GT500, click the link in the description below to stay up to date with VMP's videos. Make sure you subscribe to our channel by clicking subscribe below. I'll see you next time.